Hello all, this is Jerry Rothkoff, Managing Attorney of Rothkoff Law Group, an elder care law firm serving seniors and their caregiver loved ones in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. We are continuing our Zoom interview series of the who's who of the front lines of advocacy for seniors, especially the after effects of COVID. And today we are privileged to have Bob Sposato, who is the hospice administrator of Acacia Hospice in New Jersey. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure having you. So, hospice, as we were briefly discussing, has undergone some changes related to COVID, and we're going to talk a great deal about what those changes are and how COVID-19 has specifically affected the patients that you're charged to provide services for at end of life. But let's talk a little about Acacia Hospice. Can you talk about your duties as the hospice administrator of Acacia and the type of individuals that you serve?
So from Acacia Hospice's standpoint, my main duty here really is administrative function to make sure that the clinical aspect has everything that they need to get their job done. I oversee the regulatory responsibilities, CHAP surveys, everything else that comes down from an administrative standpoint. And then my real function here is to make sure I'm supportive of the clinical staff from top to bottom. I work with our clinical director, Deb Nicholson. We work hand in hand to make sure that the nurses, the aides, the social workers, everyone else that works for the organization has everything they need to get their job done on a daily basis and then moving forward.
It's my understanding that you're associated with the Masonic Village in Burlington, New Jersey. So can you talk a little about your association with the Masonic Village and what other territories or individuals do you serve, whether in long-term care communities or in the community at large?
Sure. We're working with the foundation from the Masonic Village. Basically, we're a offshoot of Masonic Village. It was something that was created by them back in 2009. And it was really a oversight for them, not an oversight, but something that they were looking at to, in their continuum of caring for everyone they have a continuous care retirement community here. And there were a lot of times where they had people that were passing and they really had to bring in outside agencies. So they wanted to start that on their perspective and then bring in the Masonic values and vision that they had to take care of those patients. That being said, not everyone, the majority of the patients we take care of are not Masons. You don't have to be a Mason to even be in the village, let alone be on Acacia's hospice. So, we're a separate entity from that as far as, the patients we see and what we do. And we see patients all throughout the 4-county region. And for us, the 4-county is Burlington, Camden, Mercer, and Gloucester counties. Primarily Burlington and Camden. We're reaching out to the other communities now. We have a few patients there, but our time frame is really spent within that 4-county region. And the people that we take care of are anyone that needs hospice. We do home care also, but also for hospice. And in our time point, we're looking for people that have been, unfortunately diagnosed with a life-limiting illness that gives them usually a 6-month or less trajectory. We come in and we provide the services for those patients and take care of them until until they pass, and their families also. I mean, we'll get into that, but that's a big part of the process that we do for hospice.
Why hospice? I mean, why did you're a nurse by profession? Am I correct?
Correct.
So why? And you could have went into I looked at your bio. You've been in emergency medicine. You set up a new ER, I believe, in Burlington County, associated with Deborah Hospital. So why hospice? What do you enjoy about, like you just talked about, working with families and counseling at end of life that really fulfills you emotionally? What do you enjoy about hospice profession?
I think the funny thing about hospice is it's always a dirty word in the medical community. It's hospice, someone's going to die. And a lot of people think it's just a place where you're going to go and you pass away pretty quickly. And from my perspective, that's not what I saw. I think out of the most gratifying experience I've ever had of being a nurse is working in the hospice field. And I love everything else I did, emergency medicine, oncology, all sorts of different stuff. But I've always come back to hospice as my probably my greatest achievement as a nurse. And I think the reason for that is I'd be invited into patients' houses where I would never be in before. And you're involved in patients and families' lives in probably the worst time that you could possibly be involved. There's, their loved ones dying. And I think at this perspective, this is where I get to make the biggest impact, not only in the patient that's passing, but the family. And I think for me personally, just being there for the patient while they're in this transitioning phase and they're dying is incredibly gratifying, but also to try and work the family through the process. There's too many times that families don't have the ability to, be on hospice for a long time or get the education they need about what's going to happen during the transition with the patient. And it really wreaks havoc on their emotional system. And I think being a hospice nurse, I can transition everyone a little bit easier. You're still going to lose the patient in most circumstances, but I'm going to transition everyone a little bit easier. That I'm going to make the transition much easier and painless for the patient, and I'm going to make the family more educated and try to work them through their grief and bereavement. But it's a whole team atmosphere, and I think that's something else that I loved tremendously from our clergy to our social workers to our nurses. They're probably the most caring individuals I've ever seen in any facet of the medical field, and I think you have to be in this type of environment.
No doubt about it. It takes a special person who truly cares and has a great deal of empathy to do what you do specifically related to hospice or long-term care for that matter.
Right.
Let's talk about the impact COVID has had on Acacia, but more hospice in general, where how has that affected the patients that you work with, and how has that affected the services that you provide? For example, I know, in Masonic Village, unfortunately, there are residents who passed away from COVID at Masonic Village, possibly who've been under your hospice care. So let's talk, how has it affected the services you provide, and how has that impacted you as a person as well? Maybe you even a stronger person who can, and a better administrator, a better father. Could you talk a little about what some of your personal takeaways as well?
Sure. It did affect us, and I have to say, first and foremost, the team here did an amazing job, from everyone from the village all the way through Acacia Hospice. It was just an incredibly challenging time for us, not only for the patients that were coming on and dying, but the way we did things operationally. It was just an absolutely crazy month. Our numbers jumped up very high during April, and I think part of that was obviously for the COVID patients that did get COVID, ended up getting sick and passing. And I think what some people don't understand is that it probably would have happened anyway. I think COVID was just kind of the catalyst to that.
When you say would have happened, their passing would have happened. Is that, you said, was that okay?
Yeah, their passing would have happened. And I think some of the patients and I think a lot of people forget, a lot of the patients, or not a lot of them, but some of the patients we had on had a lot of other comorbidities. So as an example, they had a really severe case of CHF or congestive heart failure, or they had other issues that were going on with their body that they were already on hospice for. And COVID was just another addition to that. It could have been a neurovirus, it could have been the flu, and these patients already had things in their history like do not resuscitate orders, do not intubate orders, do not hospitalize. So, we did the best caring for those patients in their homes as an example, and that patient, they would pass away. But at that point, they didn't want to go to the hospital. They didn't want to go to any of that because they've already been to a point where they had some other life-limiting illness, and it, kind of unfortunately brought them to that point just a tiny bit quicker than it would have if they didn't have COVID. But I think it was unfortunate for every situation. I think as a society, we just really had to deal with this, where it's something we've never dealt with. And in all my years in the medical field, this is the first time that I've dealt with some type of pandemic. And I think it makes me a more, I just say observant person, I think, in general. Not only washing your hands and doing the normal things that I think we take for granted, but trying to make sure that every aspect of my life revolves around making sure I'm prepared, my family's prepared, the people I work with are prepared. And I think some of that kind of got, not lackadaisical, but we really didn't pay as much attention to it as we should have. And I think in the future, you'll start to see a much bigger emphasis on making sure that we're protected, the patients are protected, we're looking looking at people coming in and screening visitors. I mean, all of that's going to change in the future. And I think the good part was this is just an amazing team that kind of got their way through this. And then as an administrator, it was kind of trial by fire, because all of this stuff comes and you're like, oh, what do we do? So it changes every day. Regulations, New Jersey, CMS, everything that came through was literally a firestorm of updates and changes and trying to redirect ourselves. But they came out of it pretty well. And I have to say that, working here was just an absolute joy, because you looked at the people and the dedication that they had to make sure that the patients got through this. And we had plenty of patients that actually had COVID and passed through it without passing away. They've become negative at this point, just because from their standpoint they had COVID and it's kind of out of their system at this point. But we've had patients that had it and passed, and we had patients that had it and now they're no longer COVID positive.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I can analogize what you talked about with regard to how to revamp, maybe revamp your product of services that you provide, and review your checklist and protocols. Because I think no matter what we do, whether it's elder care legal services like Rothkoff Law Group provides, or hospice and related services that Acacia Hospice provides, we all get into a comfort zone. And sometimes because things are doing relatively well, we're providing an excellent product, our staff is doing well, we have great staff, we have great systems, our clients and our families that we're working with are satisfied with the services. Maybe we get a little too comfortable at times. And if you want to look at the bright sides of COVID, I think one of the potential bright sides of COVID is it took us out of our comfort zone. Yep. We all had to reevaluate our protocols and systems and how we deliver whatever service and product, whether it's hospice, whether it's legal services or otherwise, long-term care service that we're providing. We had to communicate with our staff differently. We had to communicate with our residents, our patients, our clients differently. And arguably, when we come out of this, that is probably a good result, because it's always nice to bring you outside your comfort zone, because you grow as a professional, you grow as a healthcare provider, you grow as an attorney, you grow as a person, you grow as a father, you grow as a parent, you grow as a spouse. And that's a good thing in that capacity.
And communication was a big issue for us too. I mean, I think that the normal way that we communicate with family and their patients, and family and the patients that we work with, from our perspective, a lot of times we take for granted that we'll be able to just see them. We'll go in, we'll have a conversation. Now it was video. I mean, we really brought in the videos and the phone chats and FaceTime, all of these things that we really took for granted as far as communication goes. We've enhanced everything from emails to emergency phone trees and lists, and it's just been an incredibly, I think from my standpoint, it's almost energizing, because I think it gives you that new perspective. Again, maybe something you wouldn't read that you had to deal with on a regular basis is, you always hear, and actually that's how hospice does, no one ever wants to die alone. So how did you deal with that when, as you were dealing with, and those who work in long-term care as a family member in long-term care know, that families and visitors were not permitted, and are still not permitted, for at least for in-person visits. There's outside visits with significant limitations that have been in place for a little over a week now, since Father's Day. But for 3+ months, all visits were banned. I know compassionate care visits, such as through hospice or end of life with family, were permitted, although each facility translated those requirements differently. Right. So
can you talk about how Acacia dealt with the human touch, holding someone's hand at death, and how you dealt with that?
I think the good part for us, and this is where the nurses come in and their empathy and their ability really to get down on a personal level with our patients. One of the things that we realized quickly was, in this situation, we weren't, and end of life is always a really difficult situation to not have somebody involved with the patient, whether, to be there, their family members holding hands, it doesn't matter. I think even for the COVID positive patients in the beginning, we knew for a fact we were going to have to get in with our personal protective equipment. in full gowns, full gear, the whole 9 yards, and be there with the patients. And I think that was, that was something we decided that we would do right away. And the best part was none of our staff said, well, I can't do it, I'm not going to be involved. They knew they were just going to get geared up and they were going to go in. So from an end of life perspective, I think it was a little bit easier when we did have those patients that were going to pass, even with COVID. We were able to be there, and we would bring family members in to get them dressed up with full PPE. Now, they weren't able, in most of those circumstances, they weren't able to actually hold hands or touch the patient, but we were able to make sure that they were in the room with them, the family members knew. And I'm a firm believer that the last sense that goes is your hearing. So we always encourage the patients to talk to them. And we've had patients, families that don't live close by and couldn't come in, but we initiated FaceTime really quickly. So one of the things that we would do is we would do a video conference through Zoom, Skype, or whatever we're able to get to. We were able to get that together where we could have those people talking to the loved ones during that last time frame. So it worked out tremendously well for us, better than we thought we were going to be able to do that. And as restrictions eased, we were able to get more people in. And that included in their homes and in different facilities. So it worked out well for us. And I definitely know that that was going to be an issue with people who weren't passing with COVID. We had patients that were on hospice that didn't have COVID and still had the same situation. So we would try to rectify that situation to make sure that we're on call with them. But I have to say, even the home health aides were fantastic with that. Every time they were in the phone, they would have the family's loved one call in and talk to them on a phone conversation. Even if it was a person who was in a vegetative state and couldn't respond, we still wanted them to hear their loved one's voice. And I think there's so many times in a facility where you have so many patients, it's almost impossible to do that with every patient on a repetitive basis. But with hospice, we're coming in almost every day to see the patient. And from an aid standpoint, they're able to take that time to get the person on the phone, talk to them. And it just made, in our opinion, not only did it make the patient feel better, I think it made the family feel better too.
Great. The last few minutes we have, what do you like to do when you're not a hospice administrator? What do you like to do for fun?
To be honest, a lot of my time really is the hospice administrator, but for fun, I've got a large family. We do camping. We kind of go, that's my way to kind of digress at the end of the day, just to, kind of unwind and, come in and talk with the family. I have 2 young boys that are at home now. My older daughters are, they're out of the house, but I have a grandchild that recently came about. So he's about 2 months old now, kind of right in the middle of COVID.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, good stuff.
It was right during the middle of COVID. So I kind of unwind with them, but a lot of camping, a lot of self-reflection. I think that kind of helps me out. I mean, a lot of times when we take a look at the patients, and I think this is important for our staff too, a lot of times that we see these patients come in and leave so quickly, they're coming on to service and they're leaving within a short period of time. It really makes you think about your mortality and mortality in your family and those kind of things. So I think it just, it's something in the back of your mind. And I think spending time with them kind of eases a lot of that transition for me personally. I mean, I think everybody has their different way to deal with it, but for me, that's a way to kind of get an outlet with it.
Great outdoors camping. Yep. I've been reading articles about RVs have gotten much more popular these days.
Yes. People, we bought an RV in 2018 and we went camping. As you can see, I'm a little bit sunburned today, but we went camping this weekend and had a fantastic time. And it's really just my wife and the two boys, but it's just an excellent time. And it's a time to have just by yourself, to not be involved with the masks and COVID and everything else. I mean, it's just a little bit of time away from that.
I was talking to my wife about you see these souped up RVs on TV, and they look gorgeous, and it's as much as purchase of a house in some cases, but then I keep going back to, we're a family of 7.
Oh.
If we would absolutely kill each other. I can't imagine being in, even though they're beautiful, being in that confined space in an RV for a weekend would be not fine, but
I was going to say, you can bang a weekend out. Anything longer than that, I've had 7 people, because with my other daughters and everything, it's usually 7 to 10 depending on who they're bringing. But a weekend's probably the longest you want to stay.
Fair enough. Well, 15-20 minutes flies by, Bob. So thanks so much for your time today. Keep up the great work. We were speaking with Bob Sposato, the administrator of Acacia Hospice. So thank you. Keep up the great work Acacia does, and thank you for your commitment to seniors, especially in this time when their families are not able to be there, and to be able to have someone be there through a life cycles, which includes, of course, the passing of an individual. So thank you for all you and Acacia Hospice do. So
Thanks so much, Jerry.
great talking to you. Thank you
Take
for
care.
your time today.